Hi, I'm Benjamin Payne. At the K-12 Education Office at Hillsdale College, we support school founding groups and their efforts to start classical schools across the country. Finding the right leader is one of the first and most important steps to building a successful school. While we do consider experience in education, we seek candidates who exhibit unwavering personal integrity, honesty, courage, and servant-hearted leadership. Perhaps that's you. If you're looking to engage in fulfilling, impactful, and challenging work protecting our nation's future and building up the next generation of virtuous citizens, we'd love to hear from you. I'm looking for strong school leaders right now. Learn more about how you can make a difference at hillsdale.edu/leader. hillsdale.edu/LEADER. That's hillsdale.edu/leader.
Welcome to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, bringing you insight into classical education and its unique emphasis on human virtue and moral character, responsible citizenship, content-rich curricula, and teacher-led classrooms. Now your host, Scott Bertram.
We continue a series of episodes from presentations delivered at Hoogland Center for Teacher Excellence seminars. The Hoogland Center for Teacher Excellence, an outreach of the Hillsdale College K-12 Education Office, offers educators the opportunity to deepen their content knowledge and refine their skills in the classroom. These one-day conferences are hosted during the academic year in cities across the nation and feature presentations by Hillsdale College faculty, K-12 office staff, and leaders in the Hillsdale network of member schools. There is no cost to attend, and attendees may earn professional development credits. Currently, the Hoogland Center is hosting a series exploring the art of teaching a variety of subjects. To learn more about upcoming events, visit our website, k12.hillsdale.edu.
Thank you for the kind words. It's great to be here. And I'm pretty sure my mom has never watched any of those online classes. I ask her about it subtly now and then, but I've never been able to get anything more than a So, I don't know, she's fierce and funny and Irish, and I'm sure she could teach Dante and Milton a thing or two. But in all seriousness, great to be here, and I'm grateful to the Hoogland Center for the invitation. And I want to talk today about why we should read and study Dante, especially the Divine Comedy. I am a hopeless lover of this poem. I've loved it for as long as I can remember and taught it throughout my entire career. Most of my own love of literature started through the good graces of a great teacher in my senior year of high school. I think I was on the way to becoming a chemical engineer or something like that, until I ran into Mr. Smith was his name. And what he did is the common sense thing. He put the best books in front of us, and then he taught them with a lot of care and joy. And that was all it took. And it was the first time I ran into Shakespeare seriously, Dostoevsky, and so many others. So always grateful to remember my own teacher. And of course, when I got to college, I knew really nothing about the Divine Comedy, but I was intrigued by the beginning of it. In Italian, it's Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita mi ritrovai per una selva oscura che la dritta via era smarrita. In the middle of the journey of our life, I found myself in a dark wood, for the straight way was lost. And that just kind of got me. And I thought, what is that poem about? I'd also heard a few things. I'm very susceptible to enthusiasm over great literature. And on the back of a book in a bookstore, I saw T.S. Eliot pronounce this: Dante and Shakespeare divide the modern world between them. There is no third. So now I'm like, okay, now I'm really done for. And then I ran into a great teacher again in college, great teacher in graduate school. And next thing I knew, there was an opportunity to teach a Dante class at Hillsdale. And it started off, when we teach, I'm going to do everything in this class. And then it gets more and more focused by the iterations. And its most current form is just 44 Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes on the Divine Comedy. A couple cantos a class, beginning to end, and it's probably my favorite class to teach, aside from my 4 other favorite classes to teach, which is Shakespeare and others. But in all seriousness, teaching that next spring and already looking forward to it. I'll share what I think is of value in Dante in 45 minutes, and also hope to create that little spark that Dante talks about near the end of the Divine Comedy. It's remarkable when you've read the Divine Comedy and you finally get to Paradise, and you're so far into the poem, and you're so convinced of Dante's greatness, and then you hear him say that the whole effort of the work is to create a little spark in the life of the reader. Why? Because Dante's confident that a little spark, well, I shouldn't say this in California, I suppose, a little spark can cause a great fire. So Dante says that's as true about what can happen in this climate and what happens with readers and souls, actually. A little bit of fire can do some remarkable things. So anyway, that's how I first got interested in Dante, and one of the goals, I think especially, of the talk today. Now, you have your folder. Everybody there's a handout in there that I have presented to you. Don't worry, we're not going to talk about everything on this handout. But what I wanted to do is give you something to take with you when this brief talk is done. And I'm going to focus today on Dante's life and the poem, the Inferno and the Purgatorio. Now, just before this talk, I was having a conversation about Purgatorio, which is the second part of the Divine Comedy. And I told my new friend, I'm going to put the hard sell on you to study Purgatorio. The middle part of the Divine Comedy is as good as it gets in the great literature of the world. And I hope to persuade you of that. Now, I know maybe what you're thinking, I have a lot going on in my life. Do I really need to spend time with a medieval poet? The answer is, of course you do. Of course you do. I'll suggest a few reasons why. So let's look at his life and the poem in the context of the time, and then especially at the first 2 parts of the Divine Comedy. Take a look at that picture there. I love this this portrait. It's in Washington, D.C., actually. I was teaching a seminar on Dante for our graduate program in government out at the Hoogland Center in Washington. And one of my students came running in and said, "This is in the National Gallery in Washington, D.C." So we were very excited to see, because I love this image. If you take a look, you can see Dante turning toward a mountain with light. There's water. Down on the left, you can see a little bit of fire. He's turning away from the Inferno and toward this mysterious mountain. And then he has a poem in his hand as well. And it is a page or 2 from the Divine Comedy. Now, of course, we don't know each other that well yet, but I've, of course, looked up what page it is, because it's significant. It is from the Paradise, from the last part of the comedy. It is from what's nicknamed the Canto of Hope. And it is the lines in which Dante really shares one of his great desires after his exile, which we'll talk about in a moment, which was to return home and to be crowned a poet at the place of his baptism, which was Florence. So that's what that page is manifesting, is his hope. And you can see under there I put Son of Hope. That's a reference to the lines in Paradiso and Paradise that Dante, that there is no greater son of hope than this poet. And I'll put that in front of you just to start. This is poetry that is about hope. Though, yes, it begins in a dark wood, it features a descent into hell, but it is profoundly about that virtue. And I will explain now what I mean by that. Look at the top part there, the timeline. This gives you a sense of Dante's life and times. Obviously, we won't get bogged down in this. But 1265 to 1321, he's born in Florence, Italy. Big event in his life, age 9. He sees Beatrice for the first time, a young girl, and he is struck by her beauty, His poetic vocation begins to grow immediately in him. He's Italian, after all, I guess. Move a little quicker than some of us do. But he talks about that famous encounter in one of his later writings. But for our purposes, the long and short of it is, he will never marry this young woman. She will die young, and he will marry Gemma Donati, with whom he has 4 children. So born in Florence, struck by this young girl's beauty. In his first major writing, 1292 to 1294, he writes about the encounter with Beatrice and his discovery of his poetic vocation. It's called La Vita Nuova, and it's a short and unusual book that describes this meeting. It also ends with an amazing promise. If you like big promises in life, after describing meeting with her, after describing losing her to death, he ends with a vow. He says, I am going to write a poem about this woman. I will sing like no man has ever sung before. This is the end of the Vita Nuova. Now, what's kind of funny there is, if you know the rest of the story, the next thing he writes is the Inferno. So I always tell students, I don't know, something went wrong, right? He went from, I'm going to sing about you, baby, like you wouldn't believe, to, in the middle of the journey of our life, I found myself lost in a dark wood. Or, I was thinking about you again, honey, and I wrote a little poem. It's called the Inferno. And so that's first of all a mystery to think about. What happened to our author in between? Now, the other side of Dante that is vital to understand is that he is a political man. He rises through the politics, which is rough and tumble, of Florence, and he will even become one of the 6 magistrates of Florence, right around the time the Divine Comedy is set. Now, so many people will say, oh, the Divine Comedy, it's a journey, through hell to heaven. True. It's about the state of souls after death. True. But it's also about the here and now. And Dante is many things. What makes him so captivating? He is a poet. He is a philosopher. He's a kind of theologian. He is a political man. He's all these things together. And so, as he is going through his life, he rises to this position of power. And then in 1301, 1302, he loses, his side loses, and he is exiled from Florence and will never return. So the last, say, 20 years of his life are spent in exile on the road. And guess what he does in that exilic experience? He writes the Divine Comedy. So things you have to know about him. He has a fascinating life. I was asked to do a review. Actually, there was a PBS special on Dante last year. So I did a review of it for Wall Street Journal. And I thought it was altogether pretty good. But the image that really lives with me from that documentary is Dante with a satchel, walking from the point of being banished to his death from house to house. And what's in the satchel? It is this ongoing, remarkable work of art that he will only finish weeks before his death, the Divine Comedy. So this poem is made out of exile and in suffering like that, even in a kind of homelessness. So a remarkable kind of story that is behind the poem. Now, the other thing to know, and then we'll get to the Inferno now, is when is the Divine Comedy set? If you look at the timeline, you can see he dies in 1321. He doesn't start writing the Inferno to 1306. So really the last 15 years of his life is writing the poem. But look what I made bold there in the middle of that paragraph. He sets this story about his own life in the year 1300, right before he achieves his greatest political position and then loses it. You do not want to miss that about this poem. That's when it is set. It's right at that moment of his life. April 1300. So you can imagine, and you get to know Dante, he's an incredibly spirited poet. and he loved his native city. And then he achieved a leadership role, as we would say nowadays, and then he loses it all. And so this experience of exile is bitter. But looking back, he sets the journey right at that moment. Little thing to puzzle about and think about. Why would he do that? Why not set it in exile? Why not set it later? I mean, looking back, I'm going to make this poem about this moment in my life, or for this moment in my life. I'll come back to that at the end. Also, how long is the Divine Comedy? It's only a week in this guy's life. So I always tell students, in the 44 class version, when you get frustrated that Dante is he's a sort of a slow grower, you think to yourself, my goodness, he was lost in a dark wood on Friday. It's only Tuesday. 7 days in this guy's life, the Divine Comedy. From the dark wood to paradise. And then what's after that? The return to April 1300, actually. That's where it ends. It goes back to that moment. This is how he set up the work and when he said it. So I'll come back to that at the end and give you a few thoughts. I'm sure you have some already. It's really too bad we couldn't just have a seminar about this. It'll be fun. Could throw this little thing I made overboard and just live a little. All right, so let's look at the first two parts and then go from there. So the middle section of the handout is about the Inferno. You can see I have the structure and key moments on the left, and then more of the thematics that I want to emphasize on the right. So when you are reading this yourself, and I hope you'll go get a copy of this afterwards if you don't have one, if you're reading and experiencing this yourself, and then sharing that experience with especially young people or friends, where does it begin? What kind of experience is it? Why is it worthwhile? Well, let's just jump in. So I mentioned that opening. Dante wakes up one Friday morning and he finds himself lost in a dark wood, doesn't know how he got there, on the point of premature death. That's where the whole poem begins. It begins in the middle of things. And our hero lacks what I'm sure all of us recognize as a pretty important thing in life, or a pretty important thing to furnish a young person with, which is self-knowledge. Doesn't even know how he got there, but he's lost. He's fearful, and he looks up and he can see a mountain, a hill, he sees the sun at the top. He wants to climb, but he is unable to do so. His way is blocked by 3 wild beasts, and when he tries to climb, he's driven back to where the sun is silent, he says, and he thinks he's going to die. One thing that's kind of fun about teaching great literature is you can always drastically shorten the great works of literature. If you I always tell students, it's 100 cantos long. A canto is just the little unit of the Divine Comedy. There's 100 of them that make up the whole poem, 100 little songs. Dante is driven back by the beasts. They devour him alive. He's dead. We're done. Let's get some coffee. No, 99 to go. Doesn't happen. It's like do anybody like Hamlet in the room? Don't follow the ghost. You know what? You're absolutely right. That is a very prudent piece of advice. Let's just go back inside, boys. Everyone's alive in Denmark. Yeah, everyone's alive. It's really true if you think about it. You can do a lot with these words. It's the beginning of the Iliad. Nestor gets up in between Achilles and Agamemnon, tries to reason with them, and sort of succeeds, sort of doesn't. So Dante is driven back, and at that moment, one of the stranger things in world literature happens. The ghost of a pagan poet appears to Dante, Virgil, to help him. Some of the first things I'd like you to think about with Dante, that if this poem it means anything, or communicates anything, urges anything, even in the way of just good counsel, the whole Divine Comedy begins with him being lost, begins with him at the point of all that negative stuff. But then it begins with him helped by a mentor, a friend, and then a fellow poet. I mean, without Virgil, without this ancient poet mentoring him, helping him, befriending him, without that, the thing is death. So we're all involved in the work of education. We need advice ourselves. We need counsel. It's good. We know that. But think of these young aspiring folks in our charge. What kind of mentoring are we providing them? And again, without it, Dante's toast at the beginning of the Divine Comedy. And he's going to gain help, again, from this classical author, from Virgil. And if you look on that thematic side, I mean, I mentioned several things here. I mean, he needs encouragement, which he gets from Virgil. Virgil is very tough. Virgil is very challenging to Dante, and Dante responds to it. He also needs hope that this whole thing is going somewhere good. And he gets that in the second canto at Inferno when he finds out that Beatrice, the dead girl, is pulling for him in heaven. So he gets both earthly help in the form of Virgil, an ancient political, poetic man, and Beatrice. And then he will begin moving. And I think one of the best ways to think about Dante, he's going to, instead, it's very interesting, instead of just going straight up, his mentor is going to tell him, you know what, Dante? You need to go down instead. You need to take another route. If you want to get to heaven or to Beatrice, you need to go down first. And that's what the Inferno is a descent into the world of the lost. And everyone always wonders, again, drastically shortening great works of literature. Why didn't someone just slip him a copy of St. Paul or something? Or, just, can you speed this thing up? But Virgil, the guide, the mentor, looks at him and says, you need this other thing first. This descent into hell, into the Inferno. And I think that, when I step back from Dante and I look at the Inferno, for example, or that descent, the need for it, I tend to think of it in this way. What Dante needs is some kind of new education and formation that he has lacked. Whatever he had did not serve to prevent him from being lost in a dark wood and finding himself on the brink of death. Whatever he had did not help him. Or it helped him perhaps in some ways, but not in that decisively important manner. So Dante is going to actually receive a new kind of education and formation through this journey. But it'll be a strange kind. It will be through the Inferno first. I always laugh, because I teach Shakespeare's tragedies a lot, or Dante, and, we have a core curriculum at Hillsdale. I'll talk about, the good, the true, and the beautiful, which is wonderful. But then, what about, the bad, the lies, and the ugly? Let's give some love to those things. One's talking about Shakespeare, and I thought, he does think, maybe, a core class in evil is not such a bad idea. Sounds strange to say. But in any case, he's going to go down into this experience. And he is going to learn from it. And he is going to turn. The key motion in Dante is circling. If you look on the back of the sheet, you'll see an image of the Inferno. You might have even heard the circles of hell, the 9 circles, circle 8, circle 7, circle 6. Dante likes circles. And this is the way that he moves as a soul and as a person and as a learner. He moves like this. He doesn't go like this. He goes like this. And then he goes like this. But it's always this circling, turning motion. And I think for Dante, and we could find analogies for this in Plato or in theology. It's like a conversion experience, a turning experience, away from the dark wood, down, and then up again. So what does he learn through this? Why would you ever want to take a journey like this? Well, as I mentioned there in the middle of that second column there, what Dante doesn't really know well is himself, but in particular, he doesn't really know the truth of his own strongest desires and loves. What does he love most? What does he love second most? What does he love least? What does he want? He needs to get to know himself. If you think of your students, think of ourselves, we have desire. And for Dante, the human being is a lover. He's going to be a lover one way or another. So what kind of lover will a human being be? So Dante's going to need to examine himself on this. And Dante really gains this kind of self-knowledge, and I think a very human and powerful fashion. He gains it by meeting souls who are dominated by certain loves and then tell him their stories. This is in the Inferno. As you might imagine, we are in the Inferno after all. Like personal responsibility is not like way up there with the lost souls, truthfulness, things like that. But what they do is they tell Dante their stories. And one of the dynamics of the work is Dante listening to the poetry of the lost and reflecting on it. Does he sympathize with them? Does he get angry with them? This is how he is going to learn in the poem. One of the means by which he learns is actually through storytelling. And each of these great lost souls in Inferno, they're poets. They're great storytellers. And the story that they really love to tell is the story of their own soul. This is who I am. This is how I got here. This is why I'm not to blame, or whatever. And so Dante will encounter circle after circle, story after story. And he will learn through this. He's not only learning about the soul he's listening to, of course, but he's learning about himself as well in the descent into the Inferno. I think you might think with a young person especially, have they ever been asked, what do you love most? What do you desire? What are you looking for here? What do you want? So there are a lot of answers to those questions in the Inferno, and they tend to be, distressing or despairing or lost answers. They also tend not to be particularly honest. You ever been maybe on a plane and someone starts telling you a story about themselves and you're kind of like, I wonder if that's the truth. Or I wonder if that's accurate. Or I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. This is the dynamic of the Divine Comedy, but especially of the Inferno. So Dante needs this journey. He needs this experience. He needs to learn to examine his loves. He needs to gain real actual self-knowledge if he's ever going to mature and head in the other direction. That's why he goes down and why he needs to go down. The other thing he learns throughout the Inferno, and really the rest of the poem, is something that I want to throw out there as well. He learns the goodness of, or the helpfulness of being corrected by another person. And this is a very interesting pattern to watch. Most of us, I'll speak on behalf of human nature if you don't mind, most of us aren't crazy about being corrected. We don't think like, oh, thank you, that was wonderful. Or maybe our pride kicks up or whatever. But in the Divine Comedy, Dante is consistently helped, not just by going down, not just by listening to stories, but by corrections, especially in the first part of the poem from Virgil. Virgil will tell him at the beginning, hey, don't take this the wrong way, big guy, but you're a coward. And Dante's like, what, I'm not a coward. I have fortitude. And Virgil's, not exactly. That's just one example. But later, Virgil will give him a much stronger correction, actually, in response to which Dante turns away from the worst part of the Inferno and kind of begins that upward motion. So we have to have, we're teachers, right? We're human beings. Do we think that correction is that important? That it's that helpful or that much of a service to another person? Most of us know, again, speaking on behalf of human nature, it's not that easy to do that, actually, well. People get mad, they get offended, it goes badly, whatever. But in the Divine Comedy, it's not too much to say without the experience of correction, Dante's a goner. Or he'd just be left to his own devices, to his own loves, to his own strange liberty, and that would be that. So let's think a little bit about, correction as a good thing. Dante helps with that. And we all know, especially if you teach literature, that there are works that make you uncomfortable or that challenge you. There's just a lot going on in the teacher and with students, and as Dante would say, on the level of the soul in moments like this. So this is the Inferno. If you look over, also, I gave a structural point, and I'll just flag a few things just to be as clear as possible. Dante is going to descend through these 9 circles and then get the heck out of there. One of the neatest things about the Divine Comedy is that we, being the readers or the teacher, we take the journey with Dante. So we're actually a character in the poem. Dante will address us directly. He will challenge us directly. He'll tease us. I don't know about you, but whenever I teach works, I'm usually just over there, like here's King Lear, and I'm here. And Shakespeare's not directly addressing me, but Dante does. He'll say things like this: reader, are you out there? If you have any wit, see if you can follow me now. And you're like, hey, now, that's kind of rude. Like, what do you do? What are you talking? What? You look around your office. Me? But it's so dynamic. Not just for Dante, but for us. We go with him. After all, those first lines, right, in the middle of the journey of our life. So we go down through these 9 circles, and I flag a few of the more interesting ones if you'd like to check it out afterwards. The very first circle, sometimes called Circle 0, the lukewarm, they're chasing an empty banner for all of eternity. They were neither for nor against anything. But Dante writes very powerfully of this group, the first group he encounters. They were neither for nor against, but for themselves alone. That's what they were. And they don't have names anymore, or they won't be named in the canto. But isn't that one of the first notes that struck in the poem about being lost is living for yourself alone. It's quite literally just for yourself. That's what they were neither for God, nor against God, but for themselves. The first group. What about the lovers? This is the famous canto with Francesca and Paolo. And Francesca will tell Dante, do you know what did this to us? It wasn't the fact that he was married to somebody else and I was married to somebody else and we probably shouldn't have had a picnic together. She leaves that out. It's amor, amor, amor. Love did this to us. Love led us to death. And Dante, who's very sympathetic to love, by the way, he loves love. He's a love poet. He's all about love. He faints when he meets her. So the first one, for yourself alone. Secondly, amor did this. Amor, love. Love made hell. Love led us to this place. It's all love's fault. Now, by the end of the Inferno, you might think to yourself, the human being has got a problem with love. There's something going on, something that needs to be governed in us on the level of desire and love. It would be a great mistake to think that love is the enemy in Dante's vision. In fact, it's just the opposite. But we are in the dark at the beginning of the poem, so we're only seeing the deadly forms of it. He meets the great statesman, thinking of Farinata, rises up out of the tomb, kind of like an alternate Christ, addresses Dante, styles himself the savior of Florence, and yet his resting place is with the Epicureans and the Gnostics. And I mentioned Dante loves love. Guess what else Dante loves? He loves his native land. He loves Florence. One of the things he wants to know at the beginning of Inferno is, where are all the statesmen? Where are all the famous souls who set their minds to doing good in Florence? Well, you'll meet Farinata is one of them. Not all of them, but one of them. A couple others just to flag. And it's so interesting. I hope you are moved to read this. Dante goes to the Wood of the Suicides, and in talking to one of those souls, the soul is trying to explain what happened to him. Betrayed by people, put in prison, humiliated. That experience made me unjust against myself, and I killed myself, is what he tells Dante. But the Italian is extremely powerful and simple. He said that whole experience that ended in suicide for me, it was me contra me. Me against me. That's what happened. And now I'm here. So another thing, I think we were thinking of Dante descending, learning. That's almost like a signature of the whole place of the Inferno. Me contra me. Me against me. That's what happened. And when you get to Purgatorio, to the better parts of the poem, you'll actually hear souls who say they learned how to, te sovra te, you over you, you governing you. So Inferno, me contra me, Purgatorio, te sovra te. So he's learning about the soul and the need to lead it well. Not to death, but to something better, to something greater. He meets an old teacher as well, Brunetto Latini. And Dante can't believe that his old teacher, his beloved teacher, is in the Inferno. But in the course of their conversation, he tells his old teacher, you taught me everything I know. You taught me how man makes himself eternal. And as long as I live, I will honor you, as he tells Brunetto Latini. Now you could probably think to yourself, well, okay, hold on, what does that mean? From a lost soul, the teacher of how man makes himself eternal. Sometimes editions, by the way, soften those lines to something like this. You taught me in the world above how man can achieve an everlasting name by great work. That's not what it said at all. It says quite literally in the Italian, you taught me how man, how man makes himself eternal. And Dante at that point in the poem says, if I had my druthers, if I had my will, I would undo this place and free you from it. You would not be here, Sir Bernetto. By the way, if you like T.S. Eliot in the 20th century, he was quite struck by that point too. Anything else? Oh, well, Dante meets Ulysses. This is Odysseus. And I think to the great delight of commencement speakers around the world, he had this encounter, because you always hear that. I don't know how many commencement exercises you've gone to, but I hear lines from this encounter repeated a lot. And in this final meeting with Ulysses, this is Odysseus from Homer, Ulysses from Virgil, same character. Dante is going to hear about how this famous classical soul led his men on a last voyage beyond the sunset and then shipwrecked them in sight of a mountain taller than any he had ever seen. This is an incredible encounter in the Inferno. How do you get people to go on a voyage like that? To leave the known world behind, to set out across the endless ocean? You give them a really good speech. And Ulysses tells his men, you were not made to live like brutes, but to pursue virtue and knowledge. Come with me, follow me. And he says, the men heard that, and they were so eager to follow me, I could barely restrain them. They became my oars, off we went, shipwreck follows. But that's the line, if you again, pay attention at commencement. You'll hear somebody say, as the great Florentine poet Dante says, you are not made to live like animals, but to follow paths of virtue. And I want you to say, if you ever hear that, you don't have to make a scene, but you should at least say, wait a minute, that's Ulysses, Canto 26 of the Inferno. Like, it didn't really work out that well for him, I don't think. But, just a point, there's something to keep in mind. Oh, it's very useful to study great literature, it turns out. But we get to the bottom of the pit, and Dante sees, spoiler alert, as we say nowadays, he sees Satan, and then he will turn away from Satan and begin the ascent up in the poem. In a way, Satan, who has 3 heads, bat wings, is up to his waist in ice, chewing on traitors. He's got Cassius and Brutus and Judas Iscariot, chomp, 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 chomp. Blood, guts, tears, wings, ice. Virgil says, behold this. Like, behold hell. It's that. It's the final image. And Dante goes, and they turn. He turns away from it and begins that positive, the ascending motion of the poem. It's not too much to say that, when you get down at the end of the Inferno, it's pretty much like, let's get the hell out of here. That is really the spirit at the end. And it only takes, I think, 11 lines for them to get from Satan back out. And it took 34 cantos to get there. So they are booking it. They're done. They want something better, something greater. It's not clear at that point that Dante knows what that is, by the way. But as we would say, there's this country song, we don't know what love is, but we sure know what it's not. That was a reference. Yeah. There's a turn away in the beginning of the ascending motion. And I definitely want to leave you on the shores of Mount Purgatorio, which is the middle part of the Divine Comedy. And I was laying the sales pitch on thick there before the talk. This is a wonderful work of art. And if you do teach Dante, and you're like, we should do that, we should do Inferno. That's pretty exciting. They'll like it, blood and guts, whatever. Say, no. Whatever you do, don't stop in the Inferno. You need to see Dante with the lights on. Dante in daylight, especially in this beautiful middle portion of the Divine Comedy. Remember I said Ulysses went on that last voyage and there's shipwreck and everything. He and the boys, the mountain that they saw, they glimpsed for a moment, was this mountain, on the top of which is the Garden of Eden, This is Dante's invention, right? But that's where the thing is going to be, instead of going down circle by circle to Satan, we're going up now, climbing a mountain taller than any you've ever seen. And we're surrounded by them. So as you drive home tonight, look at those mountains, you think, those are nothing compared to Dante's Purgatorio. I need to climb that mountain. But let me just say a few things, and then I'll obviously take some questions. What's the difference? I mentioned Dante with the lights on. When you get to the beginning of Purgatorio, it's so noticeable, especially if you spent several weeks in hell. The sun is rising, color is rushing back into the poem, beauty. It's a beautiful poem. And Dante says, it, like what lifted his heart, which had been oppressed by the journey into hell. And that can happen, by the way, if you teach Dante or read Dante, you can say, man, I'm getting sick of people ending up here. Or is there anything more than death? So Dante feels that way too. And when we get to the middle, color returns, light returns. And it signals the new dawn of the Divine Comedy. If you look over on the right there, beauty, light, color, laughing stars, the trembling of the sea, wind. And Dante is cheered by all of this. He feels joy again, and he even cries out, "Here let dead poetry rise to life again." My favorite lines. Like a note of resurrection, of rising again. And by the way, the suggestion that the Inferno was dead poetry. Or yes, with all due respect to Robin Williams, Inferno was a dead poets society. Like there's a lot of dead poetry there, a lot of dead stories, dead souls. At the beginning of the second part, here let poetry rise again. Here let dead poetry rise again. So what is Dante, looking for in the middle part of the poem? Virgil tells us directly at the beginning, he is seeking his freedom. The middle part of the poem is about liberty itself. It's about how to be a free soul, a free person. And he's going to learn that by learning, it sounds in a sense corny at first, but it's not at all. He needs to learn how to see again, and he needs to learn how to love again with actual good order. Because we're human beings, right? We can love with all kinds of remarkable disorder. So he seeks his freedom, and then he's going to meet the purgatorial souls, and there will be a different kind of storytelling. There will be the language of prayer, friendship, and Dante again beginning to rise. Now, again, we may leave it off here because we're at our limit, but when Dante gets to the gates of Purgatorio, and this scene is clearly intended to recall the gates of hell, which are so imposing in the Inferno. Abandon all hope, you who enter here. And Dante's like, I don't really want to go under those. Like this. He kind of stops for a second. Sir? But when you get to Purgatorio, it's a quiet scene. There's a gate, and there's an angel sitting there like this, with ash-colored robes on. And the angel just has one question for them, which is a really, I think, beautiful and simple question. He says, you there, what do you want? What do you want here? What is it that you're seeking? That's the question. That's the question at the gate. Do you want this, or do you want something else? What do you want? And then Dante will go up these 3 steps. I could say a lot about the 3 steps, and then enter the mountain. And then maybe the last point, and then we will have time for a few questions, I hope. What is Purgatorio? Well, it's a 7-story mountain, and each level is devoted to two things: a deadly sin and the corresponding virtue that corrects it. So the first level is pride, envy, wrath, sloth, avarice, gluttony, lust. All those forms of bad love. But the mountain doesn't simply purge or re-educate negatively, but it fosters in the soul the opposite virtue as well. And that's what the work of the mountain is to reorder the soul, to help it love again, to free it from any lingering habits like pride, envy, wrath, avarice, gluttony, lust, and prepare it for paradise. By the way, I was walking around Newport Beach and I saw a car that had a license plate that said Sloth Co. I was like, a strange license plate. One of the things that Dante's Purgatorio helps with. But in all seriousness, that's what that second part is about. And for my money, like if I had to put something before a serious student's attention, Purgatorio, there's only a few things that equal it in any way, shape, or form. As a beautiful, coherent, helpful model of the human soul and what it needs to be free, what it needs to be great. It is a remarkable, remarkable thing. And where does it end? I won't give a spoiler there, but it ends with the meeting with Beatrice. Surprise, surprise. And that is a difficult meeting for our hero. But after that, what's really maybe the most important thing for us, for the first time, this guy, Dante Alighieri, this political guy, philosophical guy, theological guy, year 1300, he is given a mission, something to kind of orient his life for the first time. And he's told, it's going to be increasingly revealed through the rest of the poem, what he is for. And one of the first ways it's put is, write what you see and give the world this vision, the world that is racing toward death. And Dante's own name, Dante, means to give. So it's like he gets to the end and he's told, you must give. Give what? What you have seen, what you are experiencing here. Give it to whom? To the world. It's a big mission. But that's where the Purgatorio ends. And I think, when I'm thinking of teaching and young people and myself, everything, the whole experience of teaching a poem, what a wonderful thing to lead someone toward. Which is a moment they know themselves, they have a fighting chance to govern themselves and those loves, and maybe glimpse what the purpose of their life is, their mission is. That's what Dante needed. That's what he got in the Divine Comedy. So I hope you have found that interesting. I'm happy to take some questions. Please read Dante, and thank you for your kind attention.
If you enjoyed this lecture, we encourage you to visit our website, k12.hillsdale.edu, for additional information on upcoming Hoogland Center events and other free resources for educators.